Hi everybody, I'm Ashley and I wanted to take a couple minutes to go over my reading workshop bundle for 3rd through 5th grade. You can see on the screen that this is aligned into six-week units that will take you through the entire course of the school year. So I have aligned this unit to the Common Core standards, and you can see a standards correlation chart on the screen. This is included in the bundle, of course, and I've also aligned it to the Texas standards. For those Texas teachers, I found that the unit really lines up very well. Occasionally I've added a bonus lesson where we might need to shift things around a little bit, but that's all included in the layout. So every unit begins with a unit at a glance, and this is just a general layout of what will be taught within that week and each week of the unit. Now I have not completely separated fiction and nonfiction text because I really feel the need to integrate these as soon as possible, especially early in the year, because we all know our students are not just reading during reading workshop. I need to be teaching my students to be able to read and comprehend their social studies text and their science text, as well as to apply it for their research during our writing workshop. So I don't want to wait until January to begin teaching informational text. So that is going to be addressed very early within the unit. I start with very basic lessons and then they gradually begin to increase in difficulty. You'll notice that the unit 1 is probably the easiest unit, although I do have many questions on can I change the order around, and absolutely you can change the order, but I did try to create the units so that we build upon general comprehension skills and then we begin to add more advanced skills throughout the unit. So fluency does play a role in the reading workshop units. Each week I've included a fluency passage. I've alternated between fiction and nonfiction. These are completely optional part of the bundle. If you want to send these home for homework, that is fine. If you want to work on them in class as part of your reading stations, reading centers, Daily 5, whatever it is that you do, these can be added into your routine. It's just an additional resource if you would like to choose it. I also added a vocabulary component to the bundle. Now, I've shown 2 of my favorite vocabulary books. Bringing Words to Life is my absolute tip-top favorite vocabulary book, and I had always in the past disagreed with teaching explicit vocabulary instruction. But by reading that book, it's completely changed my views on vocabulary instruction, and I try to apply what I've learned through those books in the vocabulary section of these lessons. So each week I've chosen one of the mentor texts that I read aloud, and I've chosen a few vocabulary words from that text. So this is text students will encounter during their reading for the week. Now I've included just little brief cards you can print or you can send home. I've included graphic organizers for the vocabulary words, as well as a weekly vocabulary test that you can use to assess students on their vocabulary words. Now I've also included a reading choice board that could be used as part of your centers, your stations, your rotations. It could also be used as homework. This is really just a completely optional piece to the unit, just an extension. It's completely up to you on whether or not you use this. But the choice boards vary from week to week, and it's all application of skills and strategies taught during that week's worth of instruction. For example, make a prediction based on what you read, and I do include an optional recording sheet if you would like to use that for this choice board. Now each unit also comes with a list of mentor text, and this is by far the area where I have the most questions about the reading bundle. All of the mentor texts are very flexible. If you can't find a particular book, you are welcome to exchange it, replace it with a different text of your choice. Or maybe if your students have all already read one of the books, you could replace it, because I've written the graphic organizers in a way that it can accommodate any mentor text. I personally like to replace the nonfiction mentor text with books that are going to integrate whatever I'm teaching in either science or social studies. Now, one of my suggestions is if you can't find a book that you want to read, to check YouTube, because I have found almost every single book on this bundle on YouTube, and they'll have different people reading it out loud. They'll show pictures. I think it was Two Bad Ants, they did a fabulous job with it. So I like to change it up and throw in the YouTube books as well. Now the bulk of this reading unit is by far reading comprehension. Now every lesson comes with a formal lesson plan. You can see in the lesson plan where I've included the standard, the materials including the printables and the mentor text, and then I've included a mini lesson. Now your mini lesson is when you address your whole class. Even if you're using guided reading, reading stations, whatever form of reading, you're going to want to begin with the mini lesson. So you would read your mentor text with the class, and that's going to be a very short lesson. Your mini lesson doesn't need to be 30 or 40 minutes. And I've included examples of things you can say, different guided questioning you can ask during your mini lesson. Then you're going to move into your independent reading. Now this is where different people's reading workshop is going to vary greatly. In my personal reading workshop, my students are going to be reading independently around the classroom, and I will be meeting with small guided reading groups as the remainder of my class is reading. Now I know some teachers choose to do centers where independent reading is just one center, but just because of the limited time I have for my reading, that's what my students are doing. Then I pull my students back in reading groups. Now my reading groups are very, very depending on what my students need. For example, if I have a group of students who are still struggling just to sound out basic words, that group's going to be working on phonics. I may have another group working on vocabulary. I may have another group working on the skill that I'm teaching in that day's lesson. Some of my more advanced groups may be working on extending it through literature circles, or maybe even responding to reading through writing. That's where your differentiation occurs, is during that independent reading time. Now, whether or not you're going to use the printables as a whole group or in your guided reading groups is going to be completely up to you. And then the third part of my lesson plan would be the closing, and this is often skipped in reading workshop, but it's a really valuable opportunity for students to share and to discuss what they've learned, what strategies they've applied. It's just a good closure to it. I did include a printable for every lesson. Now I want to emphasize these are completely optional. Please don't feel required or the need to use these for every lesson. It's totally up to you. This is an example of a printable you might encounter. Some of these I take more than one day to work through together. Some of these I use in my guided reading groups. I've tried to create printables where students are going to be required to use text evidence, where students are going to be required to write. I know for us, writing about reading is a really important strategy and skill for our students to learn. And I really want my students flushing out the standards. You know, how are we seeing the text evidence through our characters, actions, feelings, words, thoughts, choices? I did try to include at least one extended constructed response printable for each week's lesson, just because I know this is such a difficult skill for students. Now this could be taught, this could be during writing time if you wanted to incorporate your reading and your writing. Just really like the flexibility of this unit. Also, I want to share that I have now added all of the printables in this unit to Google Drive. So if you have the bundle or the individual units, you can assign all of these printables to your students through Google Classroom. That's what I do with almost all of the constructed response questions, and I personally do use that during my writing time once a week, just because I try so hard to preserve my students' independent reading time. And questions such as this, they do take my students quite a long time to write, to respond to adequately. So that just preserves my reading time. I have included a few different little booklets students will add to throughout the year. I have a nonfiction text features booklet. I think we do that in the second unit. just ways for students to show their understanding of different text features, have a vocabulary journal students can complete. I've just made sure to include every little additional thing you may need in these units. As I mentioned before, I have used these reading lessons for 3 years in a row in 3rd and 4th grade, and I speak from experience that this has made a tremendous difference in my reading instruction. I have been so excited to see students who are reluctant readers grow into just voracious readers.